Welcome to Advocacy and Politics Unplugged, the show that will dissect critical policy issues, explore the art of advocacy and politics, and share insights on how to make your voice heard in today's ever-changing political landscape. I'm your host, John Ravitz, the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of the Business Council of Westchester. And we're very excited that Con Edison is the sponsor for the Advocacy and Politics Unplugged programs. Each program we try to touch on advocacy and politics because they are intertwined, bringing guests who really are on the front lines on trying to advocate on behalf of their clients or on behalf of issues. And I'm very excited to have a longtime friend, not just for John Ravitz, but of the Business Council of Westchester, John Boltz, who is the principal at John Boltz Consulting. John has had a really incredible career working in government and working outside of government, working for organizations that are really on the front lines, again, of trying to advocate for businesses. He was a staffer in the New York State Assembly from 1977 to 1979. He then went over to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and served in their political legislative affairs as a manager from 1979 to 1985. He then moved to Philip Morris USA, where he served first as a regional manager in governmental affairs and then as a media affairs manager. And then he opened up his own shop, which is a huge, huge undertaking, and created John Boltz Consulting. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I gave a little roadmap of your history, but tell us a little bit about the journey. Tell us about the working for the legislature, then moving on to really advocate and lobby for issues to the legislature.
Well, I can tell you that the journey started out as literally a journey. I would have conversations with my mom at home about politics as a kid growing up, and it really intrigued me. So one day I was going down on my bicycle past a political headquarters, and I decided I needed a bumper sticker. And I went past there and got my bumper sticker for my bicycle. Then the next day I went to the opposing political party's headquarters and got another bumper sticker. So you can say that my journey literally started going into a political headquarters, looking for a bumper sticker, and it's been all politics in one way or another ever since.
Did you put both bumper stickers on your bike?
Well, the cool thing, John, I'm going to date at least me, if not you here, I think I'm more dating me, is that back then in the Stone Age, when bicycles for guys had a really big center bar, and you could actually put that bumper sticker on that center bar or most of it. So yeah, it did fit, and it was kind of fun. It was a neat thing to do, and it's been a political journey in a lot of ways ever since that bicycle ride.
And you worked for the legislature, and obviously when one works for the legislature, one really gets to see how the sausages are made.
Oh, that's true. Matter of fact, I worked in the legislature 1977 to 1979 on the assembly side. Principally had responsibilities for working with assembly members in New York City and the Hudson Valley. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of the same service area right now the Business Council represents. So got to meet a lot of legislators, and what's kind of interesting about it, you see the generational change. In some cases, you see the sons and daughters of legislators that you first met so many years ago serving now.
This is John Ravitz, the Executive Vice President of the Business Council of Westchester. You're listening to Advocacy and Politics Unplugged, part of the BCW Podcast Network. Our guest today is John Boltz, who's the principal at John Boltz Consulting. Then the move to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So you were immersed in New York issues and policy, but then working for the U.S. Chamber, that opens the door to having to deal with issues that are covering 50 states.
Oh, yeah, and that was a lot of fun. Actually, in my case, I worked out of the New York City regional office, and we covered a 10-state region in the Northeast, everything from Delaware to Maine. So we were responsible for not only chamber relations and business organization relations, but for putting forth the U.S. Chamber's legislative program in the region and seeing if we can get enacted on the federal level. So that became my first exposure to effectively lobbying before Congress with the members of the Northeast delegation. And we had a lot of fun with that. It was an interesting time. Since I came on board in 1979, We had the final year of Jimmy Carter presidency, and then we saw the election of Ronald Reagan. And the election of Ronald Reagan created a lot of excitement for business opportunities when President Reagan came to office, and we worked on his legislative agenda, including his budget and tax cuts.
And as you began to meet with members of the congressional delegation back then, what were some of the things that you knew if you were going to go into a member's office to discuss an issue? What were some of the things that you knew you had to have at your fingertips to really make sure that when you left that office, hopefully that member and their staff had a better understanding of the issue?
Well, research is the key to a lot of things too, in terms of making your case before any elected official. And we would do a fair amount of research in terms of, what positions this particular legislator had taken previously, what groups supported him or her. Even to the point of we'd find out, if it was possible, who were they close with along with the delegation, so that frankly, if you saw that there was some interest on somebody that they regarded well, that they may intercede or be able to reference their support for the measure that you're trying to advocate for. So it's really a lot of different things, but absolute research is the key.
And taking that experience and then moving from the chamber to Philip Morris, what were some of the responsibilities that you had there?
Well, they were gracious enough to give me the same 10-state region. But in this instance, when I worked for PMUSA on the inside, I wasn't doing federal work. I was doing state work, but I was roughly familiar with the state legislative delegations. And I did have the network of chambers of commerce and business organizations throughout that region that I previously developed with the U.S. Chamber. So that was a big head start that we were able to call folks who I known in one aspect of their career and say, hey, we're doing this now, and can you help us, with some state legislative work?
Not to tax you, but can you recall any issue that when it came onto your desk, you felt, you know what, I don't have a shot at getting this done, and through hard work and determination, it happened?
Yeah, matter of fact, there was one, and Westchester was pivotal on this. We were working on an employee trip reduction mandate that the legislature had enacted, and it was kind of a bizarre thing. Just one example of it. It would have necessitated a cutting down the number of vehicles that teachers could use to get back and forth to school, but would allow students to be unrestricted. Now, it was a much broader employer mandate than that. That's just one kind of crazy example that came out of it. But this was a mandate on virtually all the businesses, and this was during the reign of Governor Pataki. And matter of fact, the late Richard Brodsky was one of the initial sponsors, I believe, of this employee trip reduction bill. And Richard was still in the assembly at that time. But this became a pretty onerous burden. And frankly, it probably would have created some real liability for employers, because now they were kind of responsible for how their employees got back and forth to work. So it just opened up a big Pandora's box of unnecessary regulation and potential exposure for business. And we did, we put together a coalition of Democrats in the Assembly, and at that point in time, Republicans in the Senate, and through the fine work of, unfortunately, two deceased legislators now, Eileen Dugan and former Senator Owen Johnson, we were able to get that repealed and have Governor Pataki sign it into law. But yeah, that was an upward one from the beginning, especially with Richard Brodsky being such a presence in Westchester County.
And in the Assembly, I served with Richard.
Oh, absolutely.
And he was larger than life in many issues. So let's transition now, John, because look, you had the opportunity to work for a large organization like the Chamber. you had an opportunity to go into the private sector and work for one of the biggest companies in the country, and then you decide to open up your own shop. What were the things that made you say, you know what, I'm ready to do this? And again, what were some of the challenges those first few years?
Well, I actually had a conversation with myself, and I thought, if I didn't take advantage of the fact that I lived in the most entrepreneurial society that ever existed on Earth, and I took what I would have considered the safer way out, I would never have known if I'd been able to make it on my own. So I took that literally a leap of faith back in 1994, set up my own firm, and it's been good for the last 30 years.
And obviously, when you're setting up your own firm in Albany, you're dealing with state issues, and you're looking obviously for clients who really need folks who know the lay of the land, but also can understand an issue and then articulate it and get the concerns of your clients to the members and to the staff that are working on that legislation. What were some of the first projects that you had when you had opened up John J. Boltz Consulting?
Well, back then, one of our initial clients was Kraft Foods, and that was obviously a big presence in Westchester County, and it's insofar as that General Foods was probably the early presence in Westchester County, and then ultimately became Kraft General Foods, and then now it's Kraft Heinz, and there's a lot of different permutations. But yeah, working on a lot of those initial food issues mm-hmm. was interesting. Back then, we had a pretty substantial number of plants in the state, and when General Foods was added, I believe in 1988, 89, and we became Kraft General Foods, it became that much more of a presence. So in that regard, you're dealing with not only the production of food and the packaging and additives and all manner of different elements in terms of just the product, but then you're dealing with the employee issues, mm-hmm. and you're dealing with the environmental issues, mm-hmm. and you're dealing with the energy issues, and you're working on behalf of your clients to try to get additional grants and funding and take advantage of various programs.
I want to hear more about, again, the toolkit that John Boltz has been using so successfully for decades in Albany when we come back from our break. This is Politics and Advocacy Unplugged, part of the BCW Podcast Network, sponsored by Con Edison. We're going to take a brief break and hear from our sponsor, Con Edison. Con Edison customers, are you looking for an efficient way to heat and cool your home? Consider geothermal heat pumps. These innovative systems turn energy from the ground around your home into cooled or heated air for climate control, providing you significant energy savings and year-round comfort. Con Edison is dedicated to sustainability and helping customers save. That's why they offer incentives for installing geothermal heat pumps. Eligible homeowners could receive rebates that significantly lower their upfront cost. By choosing geothermal, homeowners won't just save money, they'll also reduce their carbon footprint and contribute to a cleaner environment. To learn more about geothermal heat pumps and available incentives, visit coned.com/geothermal. It's a smart choice for both homes and the planet. We're back to this week's episode of Advocacy and Politics Unplugged, part of the BCW Podcast Network, sponsored by Con Edison. I'm John Ravitz, the Executive Vice President of the Business Council of Westchester. Our guest today is John Boltz, the principal at John J. Boltz Consulting. John has had a storied career in Albany, dealing with a whole host of issues, and we've been really having him take us on a road trip of that career. But now let's really drill down, John, into, again, as you had to take issues from your clients and get either bills passed or bills not passed and stopped either at the committee level or opposed on the floor. What were some of the things that you needed to do when you walked into either the sponsor of that bill or proposed sponsor, or some folks that you really needed to use to raise objections to the bill?
Well, I really needed to know who I'm talking to. I needed to know the background of that legislator, what their hot button issues were, what their campaign commitments were, who supported them. I mean, it goes down again to research. If I have groups in that legislator's district that would be potentially impacted by this, to know how to network out to them and to see if you can secure their involvement as well. Because, it's the old axiom of Tip O'Neill, all politics is local, and to see if you can bring it down to as local a framework as you possibly can when you're making your presentation. The other thing, too, is you want to develop relationships with legislators along the way. You don't want to go into a legislator that's been there for quite a number of years and meet them for the first time. So when you have an issue, so what you want to do is you want to develop relationships with legislators early on and meet as many freshmen and sophomore members as you possibly can, because at some point in time, and it may be pretty soon, you're going to need to talk to them. Get to know people, get to know the issues.
And I guess that same formula works for staff members, because the staff members are the ones sometimes who are, or most of the times, are putting pen to paper to write legislation.
John, that's very true. And there's sometimes it's been said about Albany that some of the staffers are more influential than some of the members. So yeah, you got to know who to talk to there as well.
Our guest today is John Boltz, who's the principal at John Boltz Consulting. I'm not going to date either one of us, but we have been engaged in Albany politics for decades. I served in the Assembly from 90 to 2002, and have been working on issues in Albany since leaving the legislature. The political landscape shifts dramatically through the course of time. What are some of your observations now in 2025 with the political landscape in Albany, with the governor and with the legislature?
I've often thought that over the last 20 years, if one could have foreseen what New York politics was about from the early 20s on, and you went to an entity and want to do a Broadway play, and you had all these different things that you say were going to happen, and they would just say, no, that's absolutely impossible, because so many, between governors resigning, and who would have thought we'd see two governors resigning in relatively short term. Go back a little bit further. Now we see the prospect of a lieutenant governor once again challenging the sitting governor. We hadn't seen that since the 1978 race of Marianne Krupsack versus Hugh Carey. So, just when you think you've seen it all here, between coalitions of independent Democrats and Republicans, and just all these fascinating developments, and now a governor who was essentially forced out of office because of scandal, now making a political comeback in New York City. You absolutely can't make this stuff up. It happens. It's fascinating to watch.
I've said really for the last 9 years, the conventional wisdom in politics has gone out the window on the national and the state level. And you're right, every day can be different, and people who you think are politically goners and are done can rise from the ashes and come back. And obviously we're seeing that with former Governor Cuomo, who announced the week that we're taping this show that he's now going to be a candidate to run in the Democratic primary for mayor of New York City. And we'll see how that goes. Let's go back to the governor for a second, because you mentioned the fact that obviously she now has a strained relationship with her lieutenant governor, who has announced that he's not going to run with her in 2026 and possibly might run against her. She has to deal with the legislature, but the legislature is in the majority. Her party is in the majority in both the Senate and the Assembly. But that hasn't made it an easy relationship for her, has it?
Well, that's exactly true. And the interesting thing there, though they have not invoked it, is up until the last election, both houses had veto-proof majorities. So they had a certain amount of leverage over the governor on key issues. That veto-proof majority was broken in the last election in the state Senate by the switching of one seat from the Democrats to Republicans. But no, she's got a bit of a tough road there with the legislature. But for the most part, they seem to work well. We'll see what happens now with the budget. She's come up with a $252 billion budget, which is a few percent increase over the last over last year's budget. Legislature likes to add, so we don't exactly know where they'll all come together. We're in the very, very initial stages of that right now.
Yep, and both houses of the legislature have to introduce their one-house budgets, which they'll be doing as we tape this show, probably in the following week. So it will be
Correct.
interesting to see how that plays out as well. And obviously, look, you and I have been, as I said, engaged in politics in Albany for many, many years. What's interesting is that you have leaders in both houses who probably have the toughest jobs, because they have moderate members in their conference as well as progressive members of their conference. And
That's
getting
true.
them to agree on an issue, to either move ahead on an issue or not to move forward on an issue, can't be an easy challenge. Have you seen in both Majority Leader Stuart Cousins in the Senate and Speaker Carl Hastie how they've been able to maneuver in that area?
Well, I think you hit it on the head, and actually, again, the numbers speak for themselves, because the Democrats in the Assembly have 103 seats out of 150. So even if there's some degree of dissension in the conference, there's still more than enough members to put the proposal over the line for the Speaker and the leadership. Pretty much the same thing in the Senate as well, where Andrea Stewart Cousins has 41 seats. You need 33 to pass legislation here. So there is room for dissidents to kind of say, I'm not really on board on this. But I think for the most part, that both the leaders have been pretty effective in terms of bringing the overwhelming percentage of their conference together for issues.
It's fascinating to have to watch what they have to go through almost on a daily basis on so many important critical issues for the business community, not just in Westchester County, but the region and the state. Last question I have for you. If someone came up to you who was either about to graduate from college or graduate school, or maybe wanting to change careers and wanted to get engaged in being an advocate or a lobbyist, what advice would you give them?
That's really an interesting one. Well, if it's really in your blood and you have a real interest in politics, and you're good with people, and you got good people skills, and you can communicate your points crisply and in a genteel way, it's good. It's a good advocacy spot for you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that there's any particular path. I mean, traditional paths would be a degree in political science or going to law school. But it's really, I've seen some of the best advocates up here that are not lawyers, that are not formally schooled in politics or what used to be called civics. So
I used to call it street smarts. And street smarts sometimes.
And a certain degree of that is important here too, because sometimes you need to know when to go a little bit more whole hog, and sometimes you're going to know when to pull back. So there's a lot of different skills involved here, and it can be a lot of fun. The cool thing about doing this stuff is you get to meet a lot of the folks that most people only get a chance to read about or see in social media or on TV or on radio, and you get a chance to interact with them on a daily basis. And in that regard, you find out a lot of things a lot earlier than the general public. So it can be rewarding. It can be a lot of fun.
Well, and you've had a great run, and with many more years to come. So I lied. I have one more question. Now, for our listeners, John Boltz and I do also share something in common, not just in politics, but that's in our taste of music, which is country music. Two boys from New York. It's very rare to hear that. All right, give me the top two artists that are on your playlist in your car right now.
Oh my God! Well, certainly King George is top on the top of the list.
George Strait.
Yup. And I got to say, I'm going to have to go retro country here a little bit and do a little Alabama or Bellamy Brothers. It becomes a toss-up.
All right. Well, I love those guys because they were the founders of country music and the architects. Right now on my playlist is Jelly Roll and Old Dominion. So there you go.
There you go.
Our guest today on Advocacy and Politics Unplugged has been a good friend of the Business Council of Westchester, John Boltz, who is the principal at John J. Boltz Consulting. John, thanks for joining us this week on our program, and I'll see you in the halls in Albany.
John, it's been my pleasure. Good to see you, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you for tuning into this month's episode of Advocacy and Politics Unplugged. We're so grateful that we're sponsored by Con Edison, and we hope that our listeners will not only listen to this podcast, but all the other podcasts on the BCW's podcast network.
Be sure to check out the BCW Podcast Network's expansive lineup of shows: Leadership Unleashed, What's Trending, Advocacy and Politics Unplugged, The Member Spotlight, and Nonprofit Voices of Impact. The Business Council of Westchester is the county's largest business membership organization focusing on economic development and advocacy. With over 1,100 members, it is our mission to work for the profitability of our members and the prosperity of the Westchester community. To learn more, go to thebcw.org.